Good evening and welcome to the official start of the 8th Nature Marsilius Visiting Professorship. I'm very delighted that so many of you have once again accepted our invitation to our traditional fireside chat, and I would like to extend a very warm welcome to those who are watching the recording of this evening afterwards. My name is Michael Boutros. Together with my colleague Friederike Nüssel, we are the directors of the Marsilius Kolleg, the Institute for Advanced Studies of Heidelberg University. Those of you who have been in contact with us, with the Nature Marsilius Visiting Professorship for Science Communication over the past 6 years will know that this program is not an activity of Heidelberg University alone. But I'm therefore very pleased that our cooperation partner also here with us this evening, and I'm able to welcome Friederike Busch on behalf of Holzbring Berlin and Raphael Lang on behalf of the Klaus Schirra Foundation. Since the inception in 2018, the visiting professorship have given many students and scholars at all career levels the opportunity to develop and expand their skills in communicating their research. In addition, they have also brought new impulses to Heidelberg that stimulate the exchange between academia and the public. In order to continue to achieve these goals, each semester we invite an expert in science communication and journalism to share their expertise through workshops and lectures here in Heidelberg. The most recent visiting professors who have taken on this exciting task were Martin Ensering, Michele Canzanzaro, and Maiti Nguyen Kim. I'm very pleased that our search for an outstanding science communicator has been successful again. But before I introduce Fiona Fox as a new visiting professor sitting next to me, I would like to welcome our other two panelists for this evening. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Jan Rabouts. Jan is a postdoctoral researcher at EMBL, the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, whose main site is here in Heidelberg, but has also outstations throughout Europe. And he's one of our current young Marsilius fellows at the Marsilius Kolleg. In addition to a master's degrees in mathematics from the Catholic University of Leuven, Jan Rabouts also holds a master's degree in complex system science, which he studied at the École Polytechnique in Paris and the University of Warwick. For his doctorate, he developed mathematical models to describe complex biochemical processes. And we maybe talk about a bit more how to communicate this, and his current research at EMBL focuses on more theoretical understandings and description, I understood, of somatogenesis, a process that's required for the development of all vertebrates. Our second panelist, Professor Eva Winkler, is Heisenberg Professor for Translational Medical Ethics at Heidelberg University and one of the managing directors of the National Center for Tumor Diseases here in Heidelberg. Her research is mainly focused on clinical ethics, ethical issues in health policy, and also research ethics. She obtained a doctorate in medicine from Heidelberg University for her research in oncology and works now as a senior physician specialized in hematology and oncology. A second doctorate in medical ethics and health ethics stems from her time at the University of Basel, but was also influenced by time spent as a fellow at Harvard University. Eva Winkler has particular close ties to the Marsilius Kolleg. She's a two-time Marsilius fellow, but also, in addition, the scientific director and spokesperson for the EURAT project, an interdisciplinary and interinstitutional platform and project that looks at ethical implications of whole genome sequencing in medicine, but also in research, and that has its roots here at the Marsilius Kolleg. And now, last but not least, please welcome with me our guest and honor for tonight, the incumbent Nature Marsilius Visiting Professor, Fiona Fox. As many laudatory speakers have pointed out before, Fiona Fox's career was, I think, not always easy to predict and took a couple of turns until she found the position that she has in for now a number of years. She has a bachelor degree in journalism from the Polytechnic Central London University. She then worked as media relations officer for a charity providing health advice to young people. And I think during that time, you also appeared regularly on national UK television. From there, she went on to work at the government-funded Equal Opportunities Commission, ran media operations at the National Council for One-Parent Family, headed the media department for the Catholic Agency for Overseas Development. When the House of Lords Select Committee on Science and Technology determined now more than 20 years ago that the communication between UK science and public needed to improve, and launched what would become later the Science Media Centre, the general expectation was that the founding director would be probably a scientist. And I think it speaks really to Fiona Fox's great determination, expertise in media relations, that instead the selection committee ultimately decided to give the position to her, although she was not a scientist, but involved in many basically scientific and medical discussions. When she joined the Science Media Center in 2002, she, I've heard, assumed to stay there only for a few years. But 22 exciting and very successful years later, Fiona Fox is still there, insisting that the media will do science better when scientists do media better. And I think that's also one of the topics of tonight's discussion. Under her leadership, the Science Media Center has coordinated countless responses to news reports about science, and you can read about some of the more important ones in Fiona Fox's recent book, Beyond the Hype, Inside Science, Biggest Media Scandals from ClimateGate to COVID. Today, the Science Media Center is an indispensable resource for science journalists and scientists alike, and Fiona Fox is one of the UK's most prominent voices in science communication. Her many contributions and achievements about informed public discourse about science have not gone unnoticed. Among other awards, she was named an officer of the British Empire in 2013, became an honorary fellow of the Academy of Medical Sciences, and received an honorary doctorate of science from Bristol University in 2019. Fiona, thank you very much for joining us here today and taking up the role of the Nature Marsilius visiting professor. We really are delighted to have you here, and we really look forward to the next weeks. I would like to start with a few questions to the panel, and then really open the discussion to the room, and to really make this kind of a lively debate. And I wanted to start first with kind of the quote that I brought before: the media will do science better when scientists do the media better. How do you see this? It's a formulated obligations for scientists to really take science communication seriously. And I wanted to get your perspective on how you would, what do you see in scientists to really needing to do that?
I think that phrase came from what I found when I was appointed in 2001 to do this job, and I went round, and it was a bad time for science in the media in the UK. So there was the Andrew Wakefield claiming that MMR caused autism, GM crops had been just introduced to the public, being called Frankenstein foods kill. There were all these maverick cloners saying we've cloned the first human being. It was just not a good time. And so I was appointed to set up this new initiative which would fix this, which would, renew public trust in science and improve the media coverage. How do we do this? I didn't know how. I wanted the job, I wanted the challenge, but I didn't know how to do it. And when I went and talked to so many scientists, they all blamed the media. You know, the media is undermining public trust in science. The media only speaks to Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth on GM. The media shouldn't have reported the Lancet claims from Andrew Wakefield. It was really criticising the media, and we should go to different organisations and complain about them. And I was really struck. You are never going to change this by complaining. You could change this by engaging. You really could. And if you engage, we were just having this conversation earlier, if scientists engages with the media, there is a chance that it will improve what the public and policymakers see and hear through the media, because they will be listening to the really, really best scientists. And in some ways, it's not rocket science. You can, you know, a journalist can phone you and say, I'm writing a major article today about ADHD, or I'm writing a big piece on cancer vaccines and how they work. Can you help me? And you can say, well, no, I'm really busy and I'm in the lab and I've got too much to do, and no, I can't help you. And then the next day you see the article, they've gone to somebody not very good, they've given a little sound bite, it's not a very good article, but you had your chance. If you'd just spent 20 minutes talking to that journalist, maybe sent him or her some information, maybe ask them to wait for a day or so and you'd meet them and talk to them, it could be a really good article. So that's where it comes from. The media will do science better when scientists start to do the media better and more effectively. And I think 22 years on, we can now really show this. I'm not doing this tonight, but when I go out to universities, I just show the way some of this media coverage was before scientists got involved. GM was a really big issue for us. I went and met all the plant scientists at world-class John Innes Centre, Rothamsted Research, Oxford University, and said, this has been raging now, GM foods kill, and there are genes in your tomatoes, these are dangerous. You know, what were you doing? And these lovely, mild-mannered plant scientists, you know, totally bewildered by this debate. No one ever cared about plant science before. They only care about medical science in the news media. So, and sometimes they'd have, you know, the front page of Science or Nature, but still the media wouldn't care. And then suddenly, overnight, the media are phoning them up and say, will you come on BBC radio programme against some young hipster from Greenpeace or Friends of the Earth and defend GM science? And they just didn't know how to do that. So it was really a matter of saying, if you throw yourself into this and get involved, then maybe you can improve the coverage of GM crops. And that is what has happened.
So what do scientists need to learn first to do this well? I mean, taking the time, of course, to explain, but what else does it need to do this well?
Well, I think I probably have a slightly different answer to that. And again, we were just in our 5-minute conversation before, we were just talking about this, because I don't actually think... I often go to events where people tell me how terrible scientists are at communicating. I often go to events where people say you can't have our scientists because they're not media trained. They need media training. They need to put their thoughts in a soundbite. They need to be media savvy. I don't agree with any of that. I want scientists to be scientists. I think
like they are, and not
like they are. I don't want, and people, you know, occasionally I sit in on media training, and the trainers are telling the scientists how to behave like politicians, how to not answer the question, how to say, you know, you've asked me this, but I'm going to answer you with something. I don't think any of that. I think scientists are trusted. And by the way, scientists enjoy 80 to 90% public trust.
More than many other professions.
More than many. Journalists are way down there, people like me. Politicians, 10%. Scientists, 80%. So I don't think we should be changing scientists. But I think they need to be facilitated, and that's what the science media centres do. We will take the calls from the journalists. We will say to the journalists, look, you can't understand this in 5 minutes. Why don't you make a half an hour to talk to this individual? Also, we have, and I think you have in Germany as well, not everywhere around the world, you have specialist journalists. You have science specialists, health specialists, environment specialists, now tech specialists. So we can also say, don't speak to the general news reporters who are just after a soundbite and a clickbait, but do speak to the science journalists who will spend the time, who do know what scientific publication is, who do know some of the concepts, who know about peer review, because that's the best kind of conversation. So really, I think I think it isn't a lot more than the first point. If you can be convinced that it's important to do it, and that if you say no to that interview, then the media will still do it. Somebody else will do it, and that person you might be very angry that they are not getting it right.
I mean, the UK has really a very diverse media landscape, from public television, very well respected, BBC, to kind of really more tabloid type newspapers. How do you deal with kind of these very different formats? So has the Science Media Center like preferred partner they work with?
No.
Or do you basically say if your scientists don't speak with a certain type of media but speak with others?
The exact opposite to that. So bear in mind that the reason we were set up, the reason we exist, is to enhance the public understanding of science. And the public yes, they do consume the BBC because that's the national broadcaster, but the biggest selling papers are those tabloids. The Daily Mail, which is kind of right of centre, tabloidy, lots of health scares. The Sun newspaper, I'm sure you've heard of the Sun, notorious. They call them the red tops, the Daily Mirror. If you look at those, they are the biggest selling newspapers. So occasionally scientists say to me, I'll go on your database, but I don't want to speak to the Sun. I definitely don't want to speak to the Daily Mail. And we would not put them on the database, because if you want to reach the public, those are the most important. To some extent, we work with all the media, and all the media rely on us. I think because they're all now so busy that having a press office who are helping them find the right journalists is great. But if we had to downsize, I would stop helping the BBC and some of the kind of broadsheets with great specialists and just focus on the media outlets that reach the widest section of the public. And also, they don't always get it wrong. There is a prejudice there that those tabloids are the ones that mislead people and are only after the kind of inaccurate information. No journalist actually gets rewarded for getting it wrong. And we have regulators, and if you're reported to the regulator, you don't get, your editor is not happy with you. So most of them try to get it right. And again, if you make it easy for them to speak to a really, really good scientist, then it's likely to be right. So it's about an attitude to embracing the media as your way, and also for being accountable. It's improving the public understanding, but there's also a sense of, we are publicly funded scientists. We are doing this on behalf of the public. We should answer the questions from Daily Mail journalists who are asking the questions that their readers want to ask. You know, we're worried about vaccines. We think maybe these trials for the COVID vaccine were rushed through. They used to take 5 years and it took a year. Like, that is a legitimate question. So also to kind of encourage scientists to see themselves as having a public responsibility to engage with all kinds of media.
How do you see the role of social media in this context? Because it removes some of the, let's say, intermediates, but it also kind of poses new challenges also for scientists, how to communicate in these type of
So controversially, and over the month, you can all challenge me about this, but we don't engage with social media. I mean, we tweet everything we do. So we gather quotes from scientists, and if you look on our website, you'll see they are tweeted out every single day about a breaking story, about a new research findings in a journal. So we give a lot to social media, but we don't engage with them because it's a completely different skill. And one of the things that maybe we'll talk about over the month is expertise. The Science Media Centres, and there's one in Germany and there's 8 around the world, we are experts in news. And what you've got now is you've got press officers and communications officers in every organisation, every university, every research institute, creating content for social media, creating little videos to go on TikTok. It's a different skill. So we want to be the centres that you do all of this. You create the content for your university website, for all these different opportunities to reach your audiences. That's great. But when the story is in the news, and that's where it matters, that's what we are experts at.
That's where you come in.
Yeah.
So if you compare kind of the Science Media Center when it started more than 20 years ago, to its form and how it presents itself today, where do you see differences, and what has changed? I mean, you have been there the whole time, and now you just mentioned it yourself. Now it has many offsprings in other countries, and I think we talked about that. In Germany, it's the first one in continental Europe. So it's a great success story.
Yes. Yeah.
But did it change the Science Media Center itself?
So, that's a long answer, but I'll just highlight one change. One of the most, which is why I was having this conversation earlier, one of the most important things for us is getting very good scientists to see engaging with the news as part of being a good scientist. So one of the things I really noticed when I came in, so I told you I went round to see these amazing plant scientists and say, what have you been doing for 2 years while they've been rubbish it, to the point where the British government said no to GM, the supermarket said no to GM, the public in polls said no to GM. So many plant scientists had to go overseas to the US or Canada. So, there was a high price for them not engaging. But when I asked them, what are you doing? We weren't doing media. Who was doing media? Young popularizers of science, people who enjoyed it, people who enjoyed going to these science festivals, kind of generalists. And I knew that was great. That was really important that they did that. But I wanted to persuade these scientists who were very, very good and really had done 20 or 30 years. And that has been hard. Those days, I know it's not a nice term, but the media popularizers were called media tarts. Like they just love the media spotlight. And if they were applying for a job, they would say to the head of the department, we're not involved in any science festivals, we don't do, because they thought they wouldn't get the job. So I think the biggest change has been persuading senior scientists this is important. Endeavor, yeah. And I think the best example of that in COVID, by the time, if you look at who was doing it in 2002 and who was doing it in the pandemic, you have it. We've succeeded. So Sarah Gilbert, I don't know if any of you have come across her, the woman who developed the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. She does not like the media. She is the opposite to a media tart. She just we didn't know of her because she'd never done media. But there was something about that made her realise there's no point me developing these vaccines if the public don't trust, if they can't see me, if they can't hear from me and know that I'm a trustworthy university academic scientist. So she just did I think we did 6 press conferences with Sarah Gilbert at each stage of the results and finding out, and then when the paper was published, and then when the blood clots happened, and she has just been totally open. And now that it's over, she'll go straight back into the lab. She won't go anywhere near it again, but that was important for that time, and I think that's the biggest change. Mm-hmm.
If you compare science media centers in different countries, are there, and you probably have a lot of exchanges between the science media center, are there like fundamental differences in how either the media landscape or scientists in different countries deal with media inquiries? So
I would say what's more striking is the similarities. So even though, we're talking about Taiwan, we're talking about New Zealand, we're talking about Australia, we're talking about Germany, they're really different media ecosystems, different scientific communities, and yet the model works. And I think the model works because it's independent. So we're not a press office that's linked to an institution that is kind of doing PR for that university, trying to get the brand name out there, trying to enhance the reputation. We're genuinely a kind of public interest centre, which is saying to the journalists, please come to us, we'll get you the right scientists. We're all about standards, so we're about driving up the quality, making sure that science coverage is more accurate, more measured, more balanced. So I think we have a charter which says all science media centres around the world will operate in these ways. Now on the side, like in Germany, Klaus Scherer support Germany, lots of people support, they've got lots of money towards the poor UK SMC, and they've now got this huge lab on the side of the centre, which is really interesting, kind of looking into which science stories are coming up and identifying the big stories of the future. So they're doing something on the side that's really interesting and different, but the fundamentals are really similar.
The same and very similar.
Yeah, yeah.
So in your book, in your recent book, Beyond the Hype, you had quite a number of interesting stories and examples of controversial news stories and controversial response. Do you want to share maybe one or two?
Oh gosh, which one would you like to hear?
Pick one.
Oh, okay. So, right, I'll give a vote.
Yeah.
So, David Nutt being sacked by the government because he was the drugs advisor and his advice was inconvenient. Phil Jones, Professor Phil Jones from the Climate Research Unit at UEA, University of East Anglia. 10 years worth of his emails were stolen before a big IPCC meeting and put on the internet, and they said that climate change was a hoax based on his emails. What are the other chapters? Animal research going from something that no university talked about. It was like the dirty little secret that, you know, the facility in the university where the animal research was happening was kind of disguised. Nobody knew it was there. How it went from that to the end of that chapter with total openness, universities having everything on their website, mentioning their use of animals. Which would you like to hear?
Let's take a vote.
Take a vote. Tim Hunt being cancelled for making a sexist joke at a journalism conference in South Korea. Human-animal hybrid embryos, which stem cell researchers were trying to use, and then the government, there was a public consultation and the Catholic Church organised an orchestrated response. So 90% of the responses said no, we don't want scientists to use human-animal embryos, and it was banned. Tony Blair, the Labour government, banned it. So we overturned that. So these are the chapters.
Which one? I asked the audience. What
Shout out.
The first one gets it.
I'd like to hear more about the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, so you might have noticed in the introduction that I used to work for a Catholic overseas aid agency. So I think it's called Caritas in Germany, and it's CAFOD in the UK. It's one of the big 5 overseas aid agencies. My parents were they're dead now, but Irish Catholics, and so I was brought up a Catholic, and my mum was absolutely delighted that I went to work for CAFOD. But then when I came into science, she was not quite so happy. And then in particular with this story, so the stem cell scientists, it was the very beginnings of stem cell research. So they wanted to use these hybrid embryos because they couldn't get enough stem cells to do their early experiments from donations from women. It was unethical, actually, to ask for women to donate when this was such an early stage. So they wanted to use cows' eggs or rabbits' eggs to do this human cloning and therapeutic cloning to just better understand how Huntington's, motor neuron disease, Alzheimer's research are very much lab-based. But then the Catholic Church organised the opposition to this, and basically we woke up. We actually found out the Science Media Centre has a Christmas party every year. It's a really good party. All the journalists go, all the scientists go, and everybody loves it. There's a waiting list of hundreds to come to the party. And at the party, I just remember there was a politician, Evan Harris, he was a Lib Dem, and he was chair of the Science and Technology Committee in Parliament. And I just noticed that he was walking around the party, and every group he went into looked alarmed and concerned, and then he walked into another group, and they looked alarmed, and I was trying not to drink too much because it's my party, so I can't. And I was like, I'm really noticing something. And then I kind of had this deluge, like, we've seen the legislation, the government are going to ban this research. And we had quite a lot of those researchers were in the room. So Professor Stephen Minger from King's, various other scientists, Chris Shaw, who's a motor neuron disease researcher at King's College London. He'd applied Ian... who made Dolly the sheep? He's just died. What was his name? Oh my gosh, right. Someone look it up on the phone. The creator of Dolly the sheep. He just died in his 90s. So they were there, and they had applied to the HFEA to get the license to use these hybrid embryos in their research. So basically, we kind of abandoned the drink. We went into the office, we sat down and said, what do we do? And within 24 hours, we held a press conference where all of these scientists, and we arranged for the journalists to talk to patients. And then it built from there. It took about a year. All the patient research charities parties all got involved. And it was probably the closest thing to campaigning, but it was just getting the facts out. It was just making sure that all the journalists knew what this involved. And my final thing on the Catholic Church was that at the time, my mum, it was an Easter holiday, and my mum came to stay with me for Easter, and I took her to Mass. So I'm not a practicing Catholic, but when my mum came, I took her to Mass. So I took her to Mass, and we had my little boy, who was only 5 or 6 at the time, and it was Easter, and they always make a big thing of the Easter message. So I'm just kind of sitting there thinking, oh, hopefully this will end soon. And then the priest comes out and says, this Easter, our special letter is, and reads a letter out against human-animal hybrids, and gets all the facts wrong. So I basically say to my mum, I'm sorry.
So you stood up?
You look after, no, I didn't stand up in the church. You look after my little boy. I go outside, I phone everybody and basically say, right, I'm going to get this from the priest. I will send it round to you. You fact check it. We will get this out to every single journalist. And by the end of the day, because it's Easter, so nothing else is happening. Everybody's on holiday. There was no government announcements. So basically the row between the Catholic Church and the scientific community, and it was really clear that they have every right morally and ethically to oppose this, but not to get their facts wrong. They were saying they're creating humans and cyborgs and all of this language, just getting the science completely wrong. So yeah, I was quite proud of that. So and the end result was, I mean, so many scientists got involved in this, and they lobbied that we don't do that. We just do the media side of it. The journalists reported it really accurately, repeatedly throughout the year, every twist and turn, and then the vote came in the House of Commons, and it was a massive vote in favour of allowing this research. And then just one postscript was that over the year, science had moved on and they didn't need to do research on hybrids anymore. So after all of that, somebody phoned me and said, don't you think that was a waste of time, that you spent a year campaigning against this ban? And now no one's even asking for funding. And I said, no, it wasn't, because it was the principle of scientists being stopped from pursuing a promising area of science because of an orchestrated campaign that wasn't based on good science.
I mean, so my impression is that one of the underlying themes of what you have always done is to strive for greater openness and accessibility for scientists to the public, but also to get really, let's say, the scientific facts out to as many people as they can.
Yeah.
And so post-corona, I mean, my impression is a little bit that some also scientists retrieve or step back also from their public role because it has been taking too much time, or they have been attacked over and over again, and the similar things may be happening also in the area of climate change. So how do you defend the gains that you have made in the Science Media Center, also, let's say, against maybe also kind of much more aggressive tone that exists now in many debates, and maybe that existed 10 or 20 years ago?
Yeah. I think the fact that a lot of those scientists who were out in the pandemic, and as I say, it was really very, very senior scientists who became household names and were on in the media every day, but not because they were enjoying it, because they could see very clearly and I suppose it was a real moment for science media centres and science communicators, because actually, you just couldn't sustain the argument that just doing the science was enough, just making the vaccine was enough, just understanding the virus was enough. We had to communicate that to the public. We had to convince them to do social distancing. We had to convince them to take the vaccine or to take the test or to take this virus seriously. So the communication element of science became, what was the lifesaver? Doing the science and communicating how to behave. So the fact that they've retreated now back into their labs, I think is good. We don't want scientists to become celebrities or become, going on political programs because they've got such a high profile and telling us what they think of the Israel-Gaza situation. We want scientists to be scientists, but we want them to come back the next pandemic or climate change. So the other aspect of your question, I think, is much more disturbing. And this is definitely the point of one or two of my lectures is how you persuade the the best scientists to keep out there and still pursuing this kind of part of what it means to be a good scientist, when they are likely to be attacked on social media, where even other scientists, I mean, that's what I found very shocking. Things like whether the COVID was from a lab leak or natural origins, the way scientists shouted at each other on social media and demonized each other, and was really not good, I don't think. How do you defend it? I think there is a role for the institutions there, and I'm spending quite a lot of time saying to universities, these individuals are under attack. Why don't you kind of
build, basically protect
them and get them to send you all the nasty emails, and you play a part, and get them any protection they need. But there is one element which I think is just also saying to the scientists, unfortunately, in this day and age, if you're going to have a public role and you're going to have a public voice, because of social media, you will get attacked. So some of it is building resilience of individuals, and that thing I had to do in 2002, I still have to do, which is persuade them of the importance. Yes, it might not always be comfortable. Yes, there are things we can do, but the option of retreating
is not a good one. Thank you very much. I mentioned briefly that you are working mainly on theoretical concepts at EMBL, so I would ask you about two things tonight. One, about your experience in the Young Marsilius Fellowship, but also to explain basically your science a little bit as kind of a test for science communication.
Okay.
So what exactly is
That's mean.
somatogenesis, and why is it necessary to model this mathematically?
To model this, yeah. So what is somatogenesis? It's a process in the development of organisms, vertebrates, so those with a spine and backbone. And it's a process that is responsible for laying down the blocks, the segments that will later develop into your different vertebrae. So that happens in the embryo. And you can study this in the lab. Of course, you can image it, you can film it. So that's not what I do, but I study mathematical models of this process. And so how do I model this? My interest is basically how it's generated by cells that are talking to each other, communicating with each other, and so on, because this is essential for this process to go well, basically. The cells, they synchronize what they do with each other in order to form this very regular pattern that will later develop into your vertebrae. But to study lots of different cells together, a collection of many thousands of cells, let's say, it's very hard if you don't have a theoretical underpinning of how these cells may communicate with each other on a relatively high level, because we don't know all the details on the molecular level, for example. And that's why I study simplified, I would say, mathematical models that take only a few assumptions about what these cells are doing, but which you can then study in some detail and use to test some assumptions. If the cells are doing this or that, what does the mathematics say that should come out of it? Should this process work, or should it not work? And it's basically a way of, I guess, testing the assumptions, testing what you think you know about the biology in a simplified mathematical model to make sure that you're getting it right. That's the idea. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Very good. You passed the test.
So the Young Marsilius Fellowship Program is a program that we started about 3 or 4 years ago as complementing, let's say, the older fellows, and to give doctoral and postdoctoral researchers basically the chance to form a group, a very interdisciplinary group, to communicate about their research, but also to do something basically together across disciplines. And you're now part of the third class of Young Marsilius Fellow, and each class has a title, beginning and end, very philosophical. So what are the most exciting or surprising things that you have learned about the beginning and end in your exchange with also your fellows in the class? And how did you so far like the Young Marsilius class?
So I liked it very much. I learned a lot, especially I think combining people from maybe the natural sciences and the humanities. I think that combination was for me where I learned the most. A little bit about the topics what people study, yes. But by discussing with everybody, I learned that everybody maybe has also slightly different idea of what is science and how do I work as a scientist, because, well, everybody's working day just looks very differently. I'm used to people working in a lab or sitting at a desk, but then you have other people going to archives or treating patients, for example. It seems quite obvious, but when talking about these things with each other, you realize that there are so many different ways of doing research. So that was quite important for me. So these differences and then also the commonalities. I mean, we all write papers and hope that they get accepted, and we all worry a little bit about our career and so on. So the exchange about that was also very, very nice. And maybe also on our experience with science as communication, sharing what we did, what we liked in the past, or what went well or what went wrong. Maybe we also had discussions about these things.
Mm-hmm. So your cohort of young Marsilius fellows has created a communication competition, maybe to call it. Data is art.
Data is art, yeah.
So which is about the visualization of research data I learned in different disciplines. So what's behind the idea, and what's your class basically thinking about achieving that, and how much has been the kind of the feedback to?
So I don't know about the submissions personally, so I hope we have a lot, but it's in the context.
Still ongoing, so we should also
it's ongoing.
Still possibilities to submit.
Yes, still possible, I guess, for another 10 days or so. I don't know exactly, but it's in the context of the event we're organizing in July, so the symposium or fun event, however you want to call it, where we'll have some kind of exhibition where we will show data visualizations. That's the idea, but we specifically also want to consider data in a general way. So the people from, for example, the humanities or law or any kind of research field could come up with something based on data in a broad sense and make something appealing out of it. So that's also one of the criteria. It has to be, let's say, aesthetically nice. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it also has to mean something. So the data has to be a message about the science as well. Yeah. And then we're on the event
itself. Did you already
itself.
talk about examples within the?
So we gave some examples. I think in the call itself, it was inspired by other people that, for example, took data from their own daily life. For example, this week I spent so much minutes on the bus, so much minutes on my bike, and so on, and make a nice visualization out of that. So you can find these data in anything basically. That's also one of the underlying ideas of the competition. Yeah, and then we'll select the best one, or the best ones.
Mm-hmm. So you grew up in Belgium. You have seen quite a number of different institutions. You've seen kind of a Catholic university, you've seen the University of Warwick, you're now at a European intergovernmental lab. When you look at how, let's say, members of these communities communicate, what are differences and similarities, and how much does this background also influences you in terms of what you do?
I'm not sure if the type of institute matter in terms of its university or another university. I'm not sure if that matters so much. So now I work at an institute that was originally Molecular Biology Institute, and I'm a mathematician by training. I do feel that in my daily work also communication is a big aspect, because I often present to people that don't have the same background as I do, that have more of a biological background, and then I explain things with equations and so on. So it's always a bit of an exercise, I have to say, currently. Yeah. And this was different over the different places where I was, mainly because of the background of the people that were there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Your activities, EURAT, is certainly one example of, let's say, also a science policy and science communication activity that really had a great impact in Germany. It's aimed at scientists as at MDs, academic institutions, like legislative bodies, but also, I think, also a bit at the general public. How did you do this, and what was kind of the major challenge?
I think some of the elements are not kind of resemble what Fiona was telling us. So it's kind of an horizon scanning when the the researchers started. It was all took momentum when genome sequencing became visible, that it's now not taking 10 years with hundreds of researchers, but it's getting down to, it was, by that time it was, I think, 3 to 6 months. Now we have it in a day or so, the one genome sequenced. And so it were the researchers themselves saying, well, I think it was a special case even. It was tissue analyzed at the EMBL. It was a corporation, and it was clear that there's a mutation, change in the gene pattern that would indicate that this patient has a likelihood not to benefit from radiation therapy or any other was a certain mutation. And so it's a P53 mutation, and there was no way, and it was known that this sample is not a patient from Canada or abroad, or it was not completely out of reach. It might be a patient, and a young patient with a brain tumor here at the Heidelberg University, and there was no policy and no way how to communicate this finding back to the physicians who would be happy to have this information, because radiation would be out of the game, and radiation would be a normal strategy for this treatment. So that was kind of one of the triggers. But then there was a lot of other questions. So should researchers, what do we find if we look at the whole genome? Is this research, so we look at it with a certain interest, but if we find something like this mutation, are we obliged to report that back, even especially if this is kind of in our community area here, or are we even obliged to report back and have a mechanism in place all over the world in different corporations? So it was really uncertainty how to deal about it, and then I think that was the first. These were the first questions to bring together those researchers with other disciplines in the humanities, so ethics and law. And to think about how to deal with these questions, and that was 2011 was the first position statement of cornerstones for a good practice, how to use the new methods and to be prepared for whatever new questions come up, and do the science but not be scared to not doing it. So it was kind of the starting point, but then we were working on it and had a position statement that we published, and we did some outreach here from the Marsilius colleague to get in touch and discuss these questions, and then there were more position statement and kind of follow-up questions. How do we deal with little children, and how to explain that to the parents, and also if then people got interested in their genomes and said, well, if I've been part of the study here in Heidelberg, can I get my genome on a stick back? I want to, maybe I'm curious, want to do genealogy research myself, or I want to have a second opinion. So how are we now as researchers? The role is changing. I'm not a doctor, I'm a researcher, so I'm not reporting back results, but then we found a way. I'm a researcher, and I'm not catering to the curiosity of all people. So we set up different policies and processes, and it is kind of already kind of this transfer and discussing what are good rooms that kind of safeguard science in a way, but also have this permeability to society and explain things well.
And I mean, this is also the example communicating, let's say, research data or data to the broader public, and communicating data about a disease or the opportunities for treatment to patients are kind of two sides sometimes of of a coin? Are there things that can inform each other? I mean, publications always tend, of course, to paint a very positive picture of potential outcomes, and that might be very different, let's say. If,
I think that is really the difference between an kind of university or whatever research institution press unit who is kind of trying to get the things out also in a good intention to communicate. But then it always is, I think, important to see what is the constituency and the audience. And now I'm in the cancer context also as a physician, and I had one experience where I see that it's really difficult also to communicate without generating a hype or to generating expectations that you are not up to answer to realistically. For example, once we had on this on the first or the second position statement and policy, and there were also very practical material, informed consent documents that come with the position statement. There was an interest of the German news, daily news, Tagesschau, and they wanted to report on our work, so they called, and then they had journalists coming, and I was explaining everything, and then they said, well, and it would be helpful for us if you would have a patient who had gotten through the whole process. And I said, well, I'm not so sure that this is a good idea to show that, to kind of tell the story with a patient story. But I had one patient, she was very outspoken, and also I asked her whether she would report on her experience with genome sequencing, but made sure that she has every option to say no. And she then agreed, and then it was really interesting because they had this camera view, her going down the stairs in the National Center for Tumor Diseases and explaining this genome sequencing, and then there was a very good kind of explanation, schematic, how genome sequencing is working and what we are doing, and it did not matter at all what my impression, at least, what kind of the audio was below these pictures, because then next day hotlines were getting hot. Everyone wanted to learn about this genome sequencing because there was a cancer patient who was hopeful that this would add to her options, and this is what I experience so many times. And we already had kind of we had one press conference where we invited journalists, science journalists, whether there would be any way to transport innovation and new therapies without always having this patient story at the beginning, which kind of cancels all of the content of the new technology or the new ideas. And that would be a question that I would have brought to you, because they said, well, then it's not interesting for people if it's not personalized, and the personalized message has its downsides as well. But I think that's the difference between now.
Yeah, communicating. It's a challenge communicating also medical research results without creating a hype, but still make it open and
targeted
accessible.
enough so that I'm not sure that I answered all of
I will
part of the question.
We can get back to this also later. I wanted to touch a little bit about also your research on medical ethics, and which is kind of by definition always very interdisciplinary, taking into account most recent research results, but also asking kind of what societal perspectives of these are. And I wanted to ask you how important is science communication in these areas, and how.
Well, I think in a way, so it's not exactly science communication. So, for example, we had a large research project on sharing data, where the patients. So, what are the policy frameworks and the things what to think about if you explain patients whether they should whether they would share their personal data for research. And we have always a process that is very interdisciplinary. So we have parts that are empirical social sciences, do really surveys, but the survey questions need to be developed, and they are informed by kind of the normative debates that are ongoing, and then there is a theoretical part, how that would be in a rights-based approach or in another approach turn out and be evaluated. And it was very interesting because we had also patient representatives that were informing this research, how different preferences came out, and also trust played an important role, trust in the system, whether you would be willing to share your data and what kind of informed consent models, an opt-out solution or an opt-in solution would be preferred. And we put that all together in kind also of we had this empirical data, and we had the normative explanations, and also in law and legal part, how the regulation and the laws in Germany should be changed to facilitate but also kind of protect patients' privacy. And then we had this 800 patients that we were also asking in the survey, and got feedback in what kind of studies they are and what's important to them. So that's not exactly. So we are not communicating the science, maybe in the end, of course, because that is published and we have public events, but we are somehow, this is kind of permeating society in a way, because we are kind of using the input of those who are stakeholders to create this, the solutions or the policy itself.
Maybe I have one last question, and then I would like to open it also to the audience. Everybody can think already about their specific questions. So, I mean, you have been also in many different systems, and you have seen the US system also quite a bit. And my impression there was, when I was there, that there is, in addition to science communication, also at universities, a very strong role of shaping public policy. And that some part of let's say communicating science is not only communicating science to the public, but also framing it in a way that it becomes public policy. I mean, I think Eurath is one example of also how this is done, here. And of course, as a university, one has to ask ourselves, what's our role? What can we do beyond basically answering very specific questions that the public might have and communicating on these terms, but also in terms of more longer perspectives. How do we establish or contribute to good public policies?
Yeah, I think some vessels really this expert, being an expert or being having answers to the question how. What would be feasible and desired in society and also accepted. So, for example, this position statement on secondary use of patient data in the German healthcare system, it was very well perceived by the Ministry of Health, and they were building. It was one part and parcel of the new legislation that allows now for the reuse of data and have kind of this opt-out idea. But that was, so we did not do this for the ministry. It was not for the Ministry of Health, but it was a good answer to a question that was everybody was unhappy before. Patients were obviously willing to share their data if they are safe and they would trust. So if you take care for the ifs and you make a suggestion, then you can really shape things like that. Or it was just a lucky coincidence of many things, as it's always. But you can, I think, universities could make a stronger point in scanning what's going on, or saying, well, we have the research that would answer this question, or we have thought about it, or we have a group of people who are doing this for years, and this is what you need to know.
And that's the public policy position on it.
Yeah, and that would be a good idea to next step forwards.
Thank you very much, and we can actually now really join in also a bit broader discussion, either among ourselves, basically on the panel, but also with kind of the whole audience. And I would like first maybe ask if there are questions from the audience. There are.
You mentioned this example with the Catholic Church, and there were, in a sense, two instances of chance encounter, in a sense. Basically, the member of parliament that came to your party, and you being in the right church at the right time. So I'm wondering, is this something very common that you react on such encounters, or is there, in a sense, let's say, a process or where you actually, in a sense, eliminate this chance and make sure that things of broader interest are fed into your...
I'd say it's very, very unusual. It was just because you asked for that story and that particular story, there were those. But no, mostly it's quite formulaic in a way. We're listening to the scientific community who are telling us about things that are happening, and we're thinking, is that going to hit the news? So just on that same one, if you think of why we were set up to change things. Things were going badly. The Science Media Centre must have a different approach, a proactive approach, a bolder approach, embracing controversy, seeing science in the headlines as an opportunity because people are engaged. So we always knew we had to do things differently. Professor Robin Lovell-Badge, I'm sure you've heard of him. He's well known in EMBO circles, and Stephen Minger and Chris Shaw and all these others. Ian, did anyone find his name? Ian Wilmot. Ian Wilmot. Yeah. They were telling me, like whispering, we've been to China, and in China, they're using rabbit eggs and cow eggs. And we think that would enable it would allow this field of therapeutic cloning to take off, because we can't get enough of the donated eggs. And I'm saying, why are you whispering? Well, obviously we don't want anyone to know about this because that would be big news. So, and I think that was the culture in 2000, like you keep it, if it's potentially controversial, you keep it on the down low. You don't talk to people. So as soon as I heard of that, I spent 6 months. You have to do a briefing with the science and health journalists, get them in a room. There's no big news, but just explain what therapeutic cloning is, explain why you went to China, explain why you are thinking, because it's going to be public, you are thinking of applying to the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority for a license to do this. Like, at which stage are you going to tell anyone? Because you know what will happen? The Catholic Church will find out, and they will go to their favourite journalists, and their favourite journalists won't be the science and health, they will be political reporters or particular papers. So we absolutely persuaded them and all their press officers, and we ran 2 or 3 briefings before the government banned it. In fact, possibly the reason the government were even talking about it was because this had been communicated by the scientific community, not by the opposition. So the journalists already, by the time the government said we're going to ban it, the journalists already knew all the individual scientists to go to, all the medical research charities who were specific disease charities who were putting up patients, but were also explaining this. So I think one of the reasons it went so well was because that ground had been laid. And we still do that. We're still hearing people are talking about ARIA. We have a new funding agency. They're now going to give a big amount of money for geoengineering. This is really controversial. So geoengineering the planet in case we don't get to net zero with the other policies. I mean, even scientists really disagree on this. And again, ARIA are we're announcing this, but we don't really want to make a big because we know it's controversial. No, the opposite. If you're announcing this, if you think that geoengineering projects should be funded, explain why, and get your argument in. You know, we're not saying that this is the right way, but we should do the research now so that if all our attempts to cope with climate change and adapt to climate change and get to net zero fail, that we have research showing whether or not some kinds of geoengineering, planting, whatever, seed planting, I can't remember whether that is safe and effective and could ever be employed. So yeah, that it's mostly, or the news agenda. So it's either that we're talking to the scientists and they tell us and we persuade them, get ahead of this, or a journalist phones us and says, so it's not usually in a church or in these, it is usually a journalist phoning and saying, I've heard this is happening, can you help me? So it's usually those two things.
In a way, that's very early in the news cycle.
Very.
Because if people wrote a grant or an application to do a certain type of funded experiments, there are no results yet at all. It's really bringing out the rationale why this kind of research should be done at all.
Yeah, and I think that is the big learning from GM and things like that, is to, get upstream engagement to kind of anticipate. And also they're interesting debates, they're important debates, and the scientists are doing this for good reason. I remember Chris Shaw, these are sometimes, rather than stem cell scientists, they're disease, he's a motor neuron disease expert. And, if he's sitting there and saying, I've researched this for 30 years, I've got nothing. Not a single treatment. I've run 10 clinical trials, none of them have worked. Please don't shut down. This is a horrible disease. You're diagnosed, you die a terrible death after 2 years. Allow us to better understand this condition through research. That is a very compelling scientific story. So there's nothing to fear. I think what I found in 2000 was just fear. The fear that it will go wrong, that we'll be misquoted, that we'll be presented as playing God, and all of these fears stop them just engaging. And then when they engage, they find journalists who also have relatives with motor neuron disease or Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's who like the individual scientists because they meet them and they're articulate and have integrity and ethics, and so
we before touched upon this question about how to basically be positive about a result without hyping it too much, and in particular medical research, this is kind of a constant balance that has to be taken.
Question.
How to best to deal with it without basically ending up with a deadline, cancer solved or cancer cured, or disease X is basically completely treatable, raises expectation, which in most cases cannot easily be fulfilled.
So the first thing to say is that's why we exist. I mean, that is so important to us. We and I think that is a little bit different. I'm not saying lots of press officers are very, very good and care passionately about accuracy, but it isn't their reason for being. Whereas for us, if we don't have better quality, more measured, more accurate reporting, then we failed. So your dilemma is really interesting, because certainly we're trying to not raise public expectations, but you had a specific question that if you're putting the patient up there and the patient is excited and the patient is positive, then does the public kind of even bother to read? Now, I hope the answer to that is yes. And I think so certainly in broadcast, in television and radio, they almost always do that. So we have a journalist, Fergus Walsh at the BBC. He's the medical editor of the BBC. He's so loved in the UK. I can't remember the last time he did a story on science where it didn't start with the patient with the disease, then into the lab, the scientist doing the research, and then kind of broadened out to this many trials. Or quite formulaic, but very effective and compelling. But he himself does the bit that you're concerned about, 100%. So he has the patient with the disease, then he comes in and describes it, and he puts all the caveats in that the scientists at our briefing have said. And they've emphasized, and when we're preparing for scientists for briefings, the top line is, don't exaggerate, because they will already, every time a journalist is in a room, you can guarantee that they will hype it a little bit. So you need to play it down. Emphasize the caveats. If it's an observational study, say that, we see that people who drink a lot of coffee also get a lot of cancer, but we cannot prove. So constantly do that. But it is a dilemma. And I think Alzheimer's drugs at the moment is really interesting, because the scientific community are genuinely excited about this. So they almost can't help themselves from saying, this is the game changer, this is the breakthrough. And you see why. So that, again, Alzheimer's, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of research, nothing. Now, these amyloid drugs, they're meant to get rid of the amyloid. they do get rid of the amyloid. So
does it help the patient at the end? Well,
correct,
we don't know, right?
Correct. We don't know. A tiny little bit. So now they think that if they gave them in younger people, maybe, but they don't know. They keep saying this, I think if we gave them. So I think people have criticised that to me, but what I know is they are genuinely really excited. So it's not that they're hyping. They feel like we found a drug that does what it says on the tin, and that in itself is a breakthrough. So then I think it's more the journalists in a way. The journalists have really got to say, yes, they're genuinely excited. This is a breakthrough, a proper breakthrough, but clinically it's not significant. If you have Alzheimer's today,
doesn't make a difference.
Doesn't make a difference.
Questions?
Thank you so much. So my question goes maybe in another direction, because I think this sounds so nice and well, but isn't there a negative side to it as well? So are there circumstances where you would say that the communication with journalists fails, or where you get really misunderstood, or where it is difficult actually to get to engage with a broader public? And are there downsides of too much communication? So I could imagine scientists, for example, who gets into trouble by just discussing his or her research all the time, getting depressed because there are attacks on social media, or having the idea that all what they are doing is in a sense in vain because they don't get heard. Is this something that really happens, or is it always just this way? If you try to engage with the public, if you try to engage with journalists, it always works and this is the best way to go. I see that this might be in most cases the case, but I wanted to ask whether there are these kind of dark sides as well.
Yeah. So are you suggesting I might be hyping our success?
Maybe you're a journalist.
The dark side of talk about the dark side of science communication.
The nuances have all gone. 100%, of course. Yes, this is. I think I do bend the stick sometimes, because I think, certainly in those early years, if you went out and talked to, we often go to, talk to 200 scientists at university and make a case for, and literally every hand in that. I once spoke to a journalist and he misquoted me. I once did this and it was terrible. I once did, and the culture really was like, nobody should do this because it's a miserable experience. I think 22 years on, if that was the case, in all of these countries, it just wouldn't be working. Many of the scientists who come to briefings at the Science Media Centre, who give us quotes and we put them out and they're copied into the media, have a positive experience. And I do think it's worth saying that so many of them have become real champions and advocates for this, because they thought they couldn't make a difference, and then they worked with us and they made a difference, and it was a positive difference. So you can even be in a terrible article with a terrible headline, not very well written, but your quote is there, and the best bit about that article is your quote. So something positive happened. Every day we swear at the media, but I think that going back to there's the experience of the scientist, and then there's the subject of my bigger debate. Then there's the need, the public societal need to hear from good experts, and that is what drives me. And there's an element of which I do want to say sometimes this will go wrong. A lot of times it'll go right. When it does go right, it matters, because if scientists say, yes, I got harassed, or I once got misquoted, I'll go back. What is that? We've now got campaigners, commentators, pundits, politicians, all over the media, but no experts. What does that do to public debate about climate change, about...
Are experts more boring than pundits?
No, I don't. You said that I was going to stay in science for a few years because my career was kind of jumping around. I really don't think so. I love scientists. And I think there's a lot of myths about scientists aren't very good communicators. Or so. I think there are fantastic communicators, but also, I suppose, just maybe I don't want to talk too much, but there's different actors in society. And I think that's what I'd never been in anything or really thought about science as the bit that you do. So politicians do one thing, pundits do other, campaigners, everyone has their role. What I love about the scientists is they're at their best. You're not all brilliant, but at their best, scientists will put aside ideology, put aside bias, put aside opinion, and say, this is the hypothesis. And I've got a really strong, I really want it to be like this, but I'm going to design an experiment that eliminates what I want and tests it, and you get to the truth. So I think having a group of people who operate in that way, not just I think this, therefore I'm going to argue it. We're just about to have an election in the UK. Everybody will have a manifesto. They will stick to their ideological points, and good for them. That's democracy. But to also have expertise and evidence being put into that. So yes, it's not always lovely. Scientists shouldn't be out there every day doing it. You don't need to do it all the time. You just need to do it when your area of expertise is in the headlines, and more so when it's being argued about, ironically, more so.
Is there kind of a fine line between good science communication and advocacy for a particular topic? And how do you consult scientists where basically to draw the line?
So
really convinced and positively.
What I've had an argument today with Tobias about this. He disagrees with me. I think because of what I've just said, that the role of scientists, the most important role, or researchers, is to gather that evidence in the best way possible and inform the public debate. Mm-hmm. I personally, but it really is, there are in my own team, there are different views. I would say stick with that. Just go out there, talk about the evidence, talk about the data, talk about what you know about the pandemic, talk about what you know about climate change, but don't say, and therefore the government should do this. Because the point I was making today is, you can be there, then in between you, there's another group of people, campaign groups and NGOs and Greenpeace and all of they do the advocacy and they'll take the information, and then there's politicians. But I think Tobias thinks this is naive, and why wouldn't you, if you studied something for 30 years and you know it, why wouldn't you say that this is my data showing that climate change is destroying the planet, therefore we must do this. And I think both are plausible, but I worry about public trust. Again, I think my starting point with everything is public.
For a position you don't have.
Exactly. And you saw Nature journal came out and asked for a vote for Biden a few years ago, and somebody did a study on it, and the trust levels went down for that journal and for scientists in general. So and that's a particular example because it was very party political rather than. But I still think and I saw it in the pandemic, I saw scientists, like you say, scientists who were kind of enjoying themselves too much, who were out there every single day in the media, and suddenly saying the government must close schools, open schools, shut down. Must they? I mean, because they had to think of the economy, social, behavioural, education. There's certainly the health experts could show that this is what will happen if children still go to schools and transmit it. But the policy decision about what seemed to me to be for politicians, not for scientists. But that's a controversial view.
Okay. Further questions?
I would have one.
Of course. Go ahead.
Because you said that you are, over the 20 years, we're kind of pushing the quality to a higher level and monitoring it. I was just wondering, how do you do that? So how, do you have an own research on your on the science?
Well, actually, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I am meeting, I can't remember his name now, but the German Science Media Centre have worked with an academic who is going to do a research project on us. So we've never had a research project from a communications academic, so he's going to see me. We monitor it ourselves. So every single press conference, every single quote that we issue, we assess where it appeared, but how it appeared. So, for example, sometimes you can say, this is a beautifully designed study from our friends in Heidelberg. However, it was only done on mice, and it cannot prove, it would have to be reproduced in humans to show that X causes Y, something like this. If the journalists all take the first half of the quote, beautifully, coffee causes cancer, say researchers in Heidelberg. 3 quotes saying Professor Bloggs, Fiona Watts said, beautifully designed study from that's a failure. That's a failure. Actually, the UK journalists generally want to do the exact opposite. They know that they've made a big claim, coffee causes cancer, and so they want to say, however, leading scientists urged caution, and then they quote the second
kind of
bit.
in small print.
Yeah, and then we have one person in the office who is collecting all our stats, and we can show how many, yes, we can show quantity, lots of these quotes get used, but quality, how many were used to make the story more accurate and more measured. Yeah.
Friederike Nüssel.
I have a short question regarding the other academic culture. I mean, you are a science journalist. Do you talk or communicate with journalists who work in the field of humanities? Is some sort of social encounter with them and what is on in society? I mean, you have it from the Catholic side, certainly. Is that necessary to be a good translator also of science communication, or would you say that these are different cultures?
Oh, that's so interesting. So when we started, I think the view was we have to reach the political journalists or the general news reporters or the editors, because they are the ones that don't understand science. And quite honestly, we failed. We tried to reach those people, but they were not particularly interested in getting to know the Science Media Centre or getting to know the scientists. So because we failed, we thought, well, we still need to get in the news. So we very much focused on the science, the health, the environment, the tech. The really good news for us is that the status of those journalists has just risen and risen. So MMR was a disaster. Vaccination levels fell to nearly below herd immunity, below 80% in the UK. The measles outbreaks, measles is very dangerous. So even the news editors said, I think we got this wrong, because we asked our general news reporters or our political news reporters to cover MMR, and we got it wrong. So that was one of the first stories. And then climate change came along, and suddenly people realised, and they thought, well, the people who've been telling us this are our environment reporters. So the status in the UK, the status of the specialists has gone up, and they get as many front pages now as the. So now there's no need for us to reach those other groups, because within a new. So in the pandemic, the health editor, the science editor were kind of up here. They were running the coverage in their news outlets. Sometimes the political people interfered, but generally it was them, and it was good as a result. Now, you asked actually about some of the differences in science media centres. In New Zealand, the chief executive of the New Zealand Science Media Centre was the last full-time science journalist on a national newspaper. They're just gone. It's all, and I think and we always thought that would happen here, but it hasn't happened in Germany either. You've still got specialists in Germany, but I think in some countries, and that's very challenging, because then you're trying to kind of create this culture amongst general news reporters who have no loyalty to you or understanding or no incentive to get it right, really. So yeah.
Okay. Maybe let's take a last round, because I would like to ask all of you on, let's say, your perspectives, the next 5 or 10 years, what you would expect that will happen, like how the public interacts with science and what the role of science communication will be. Is everybody using then generative AI to basically try to get the answers to any questions that you have? Let's start with you, Fiona.
Oh, gosh. It's so hard to predict. And, you know, I was talking to someone yesterday about how, because of the GM experience, suddenly I think there's a synthetic biology, I noticed that when I came in, suddenly everybody is saying the next GM is synthetic biology, or the next GM is nanotechnology. So there was all these kind of frantic, like, how do we stop synthetic biology becoming the next GM in a bad way? And then it just didn't. It just didn't even take off as an issue. Neither of those became an issue in and of themselves. So it's very hard to predict which subjects will kick off, and there can be a you know, who would have predicted that Andrew Wakefield would just emerge and say this about this vaccine? So I think for us there's an element of just doing the same, doing what we know works. I think the social media question that someone asked is really critical. Like, to what, and I don't think anyone knows the answer yet, to what extent are young people, maybe our young people can tell it, are young people moving to get their information from social media and not coming back? Or are they having fun on social media, but sometimes, and in the pandemic actually, you did see big spikes in young people who spend their life on Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and everything. They were coming back to the BBC and the Times of London, and because and Sky News, they wanted trusted, objective media. And that's good. So that and all of the media organisations now, we're working very closely with the news media. How can we drive journalism? For all its faults, journalism still has some rules, a bit like science. It's still, you know, meant to be something like the truth, balance. Not everyone can say anything. You have to have 2 sources, you have to have balance. So if journalism can get on Twitter or X and TikTok. And actually we did a press conference on vaping a couple of weeks ago, and that was the first time we saw the journalist came and he took a video clip and it was on TikTok, but it was ITV News. It's a news clip, but on TikTok. So I think and the Science Media Centre so far has kept the focus on news media, but if the entire youth generation are moving away, then we will have to move. But I think anyone who tells me that's definitely happening, I'm wary. I don't think we know yet.
So what should university or research institutions do?
Well, universities and research institutes have much bigger resources than we do. So I think you walk into a university now and they have the digital comms team and the press team, and they can do it all because they've got, you know, departments of 50 people doing comms. So they can create a video for TikTok on the one. Do you not have that in Heidelberg? Some of them. I actually think sometimes universities are too focused on that. Okay. Especially the university websites. No insult to everyone, but sometimes I walk around a comms team in a university and they are all creating content for the university website. And you think, who reads this? Really? And you are like, who's reading this? Oh, I don't know, she knows. You go to her. Just out of interest, how many people are reading the website? Oh, I don't know, ask him. And you think they're all doing this, but they haven't even asked who's... And it also de-skills them a bit, I think. So lots of journalists say, I haven't had a phone call from that press office for 10 years. Because they're just not used to picking up the phone to news journalists. And there's also back to that whole question of kind of democracy and society and the public. Journalists, we might not like them all the time, but they have another role, which is to ask the tough questions and to scrutinize science. So if you're just creating content, you know, they come and they film you and they put a lovely video of you up and you're a brilliant science communicator, and that's great. But if there's a little scandal in EMBO and they should be asking tough questions, but there's no scandal. But if you're bypassing journalism, there's a question mark there as well, I think, about the public interest.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Jan, what are your thoughts? First on science communication, and then the role that research institutions and universities should play.
Yeah, I was wondering about it. I don't think I have anything very general to say, but maybe like
also
for a working scientist, let's say, if I continue my career in science, I'm guessing it will become more important. And what I'm wondering about is how much will it be expected that your institute expects, or if it becomes one of the other things that every person of staff has to do. So I wrote a fellowship application a couple of months ago, and there was now a box that said, how will you communicate about your research to the public? And I think a couple of years ago for a similar fellowship, they didn't have that box yet. So I think that's changing, which I find interesting. And then maybe the second question is, and if the institute would expect it, how will they support the scientists in doing that? And should everybody really do it?
What would you wish for?
Oh, what do I wish for? I guess a good support from the if that is something that goes along with being a scientist. I think the environment has to be created that facilitates this. I imagine. I'm also not sure if everybody should do it to an equal extent. I would say it's good if everybody had some basic competence in communicating to the media or in general, of course. Yeah, but having good support would be, I think, good. In that sense, which seems reasonable. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Eva, what about you?
Yeah, I think the importance is obviously going up because our problems are getting more and more complex, and we need to communicate also to put the society in the position to understand and to discuss. I think I'm more concerned about this aggressive parts. So a lot of the kind of the ethics council or so, they were very active in the pandemic also, and I know some of them personally. They almost needed police protection. They had fake news, fake videos about their children being slaughtered that they were sent to, and I think that would be an important task, how to protect those who want to share their knowledge as experts, and that might be really more an institutional task, because the individual is not in the position to protect himself or herself.
Thank you very much. I would like really to thank all participants at the podium, but also the audience for the conversation. I would also like to thank the Klaus Tschirrer Foundation in Holzbrink, Berlin for their continued support in the past years, and also, of course, all the technical help by everybody who kind of made this event possible. The Nature Marsilius Visiting Professorship will now continue with kind of the workshop program of Fiona Fox. I've heard it's all booked out, or almost completely booked out, which I think is a great sign. And as a last final announcement, that I would like to make, that on June 19th, Fiona Fox will give a public lecture in the lecture hall of the university, the so-called Alte Aula, entitled Toxic Public Debates, Why We Need Scientists to Engage in News More Than Ever. So we cordially invite you to join us there. And I thank all of you for attending here today.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.